If you're somebody who trades indices, then today is perhaps the biggest day that we've had in a minute. Now, yes, you have your big CPI days and you have your big NFP days, but today after the bell, we hear from the leader of the entire kind of AI revolution, which is Nvidia. And by the way, you'll notice that I'm using MetaTrader to pull up a chart of Nvidia. Maybe you didn't know you could do that, but you can with today's video sponsor, Vantage Markets. And there's a link down below in the description if you'd like to check out Vantage. This is a CFD broker available to people outside of the US. If you're in the US, you know, obviously there are other brokers available specifically for people who are outside of the US. If you're looking to trade Nvidia, or that's something that is of interest to you, Vantage has so many different charts, and I just wanted to make this reference here. You can see I was pulling this up this morning. They have so many different things that you can trade all in one broker. If you're interested in Vantage Markets, check them out down below. So with Nvidia happening after the bell, what does all of this entail, and why does it matter so much to the indices? Well, let's go through it. So the S&P 500, I was actually looking at the weighting of how much Nvidia actually plays, and I want to show you that chart really quick. So if we zoom in here a little bit on this graph that we're looking at, or this table that we're looking at, you could see the S&P 500's components and the weighting of each of the major companies or stocks that make up the S&P. So what I want you to notice is that Nvidia is the number 3 largest percentage of the S&P 500 weighting. Now, why does this matter so much? Well, of course, 5%, that's not that much, Nick. But more importantly than just Nvidia alone, many of the surrounding companies in the S&P 500 are very much playing into Nvidia. Let me explain. So when you look at Apple, or you look at Microsoft, or Amazon, or Meta, right, Alphabet, these companies are the ones that are supposed to, or thought to be the ones to utilize the new technology that AI is. Now, Nvidia makes chips. They're the picks and shovels, if you will, of the AI revolution that the market is kind of all excited about in recent years. If the demand from these companies, you know, your big other S&P 500 contributors, Microsoft, Apple, if they are all ordering tons of chips from Nvidia, that's why Nvidia's shares have rocketed in recent years. And today, with earnings, we will see just how much these companies really are buying chips. That's why it is such an important event. The whole pump in the market recently has been built around the idea that AI is going to improve efficiency and indices are going to rally into the sunset. So now back to the chart, let's have a look at the S&P 500's recent performance. And what you'll notice is that we are just crossing this level of green, or what was resistance, around 5250, 5260 on the S&P 500. That was a key level of resistance. We are now above that, and at the time of recording, we have not yet had Nvidia earnings. How much could the S&P 500 move if Nvidia earnings are better or worse than expected? Well, for that answer, let's go take a look at the last time they reported. So on the left-hand side of the screen, I've got the stock price for Nvidia, NVDA, and what I want you guys to pay attention to is this section right here. So this is the last time that Nvidia reported their earnings, and those numbers came out very exciting to the markets. So let's have a look at what that reaction was. So Nvidia on February 21st, after the bell, reported their earnings, and on the following day, the share price gapped up 11%, and by the end of the day had closed around 16.75% higher in a singular day. And by the way, just context-wise, it proceeded to rally a total of like 45% from the earnings day to like a couple weeks after. Really impressive rally there. And let's take a look at the same time frame, what happened to the S&P 500. Remember, I mentioned it was February 22nd. So if we go to February 22nd here on the S&P 500, what you can see is that the S&P 500 didn't quite have the same, 45% rally, but it did proceed to rally significantly over that same time frame. The market right now is paying very close attention to the demand that is or is not for semiconductor companies like Nvidia, who is the leader of the space. So today's after the bell earnings from Nvidia, I cannot overstate how important it is to the market and whether or not we see, a leg higher in this rally or if we see short-term reversals. Now, if we take a look at Nvidia's charts, I'm not going to lie, and I don't know what the earnings report is going to be, but just from this chart, it looks like it wants to break into the 1,000 mark. Will that happen today? We'll have to see. Again, I'm not predicting what Nvidia earnings are going to be, but if it's a carryover from all the other earnings reports that we've seen from other players here recently, we've heard from Microsoft and Google and Apple and all that stuff, I think that it could be good, right? I don't know the numbers, and I'm not an analyst that tries to predict what sales value numbers are going to be like or anything, but the point is, a lot of other, big players in the S&P 500 have had rock star earnings, and so perhaps that will carry over to Nvidia. So the question will be, are we going to see a pop above? And if so, what could that do to the market? Well, if the market sees strong Nvidia earnings today, and not just strong earnings, but more importantly, strong forward guidance, like looking forward, they give you guidance in their calls and their earnings. They talk about what they see for the future. If there's a lot of positivity and there is a lot of optimism around that, there's been a pattern of surprising the market and exciting the market again. So if that happens, it's possible that the S&P 500 could extend another couple percent higher. Again, last time you had just stellar earnings and the S&P 500 rallied somewhere around 5 to 6%. 5 to 6%, if we were to see the same rally, would be pretty remarkable. That being said, however, the last time we had earnings, the market had a recent pullback, prior to those earnings in February. Let's see, actually, well, it wasn't too much of a pullback. It was just a slight kind of consolidation. Recently, we've just had a straight shot to the moon. So let's get back to our S&P 500 chart. So if I pull this up, let's also talk about the other scenario. What if Nvidia earnings come out and they're not all that? Well, what I'd look for from a price action perspective would be, okay, if it comes back down to this 5260 level, that's fine, but how do we react as a market to that level? If we bounce very nicely off that, perhaps earnings are, a neutral or not that exciting, I still think the market overall looks good. But if you get bad earnings or you get price action that closes underneath this, it does call into question whether or not this S&P rally is going to short-term continue or if it's going to perhaps end up reversing in the short term and maybe see a pullback. Now, again, I don't know what the future for Nvidia earnings is going to be, but I can make the point that, again, if we take a look at this level, we have had a really strong rally. A 50% pullback is not unheard of by any means to a rally in the S&P 500. And I think that if there's going to be anything that gives us a catalyst for a 50% pullback, I'm not saying 50% on the S&P 500 pullback, I'm saying a 50% retracement from this recent rally, it could be something like Nvidia earnings being a miss. Again, I don't think they're going to miss. I think most likely the numbers are going to come out really strong. But if there's anything, and I really mean anything, any blemishes to this report, people will not like that. So keeping a close eye. I don't know what Nvidia earnings are going to be, but again, I'm watching the reaction because I think it tells a key story. If you get mixed earnings and the market pulls back, I would take that as a buying opportunity. If you get a huge slowdown in the story for Nvidia, I would say that could be short-term catalyst for a reversal for the next few weeks. And if you get rockstar explosive earnings and excellent guidance as we've seen them do before, in that case, Nvidia could help the market drive up the next couple percent and perhaps give us the leg higher. You also have to remember that if we take a look at the VIX currently, the volatility index is near just 12. I mean, it is a multi-year low recently. And if we take a look at that as anything in terms of kind of where the market is poised for, the market is very confident right now. The market is very, unwavered and not scared at all. Now, I'm not saying that, lightly, because oftentimes when the market gets really cozy and comfortable and bullish, the trade gets a little crowded. Everybody gets bullish, and that can get little bit messy once that unwinds. But for now, it seems like the market is cheering, inflation coming down, and earnings have overall been very good. The final one to fall is Nvidia. Let's see how those earnings come out. If this video was helpful to you, make sure to hit that thumbs up button. And remember, if you want to trade Nvidia and you're outside of the US, consider checking out today's video sponsor, Vantage Markets. Thanks very much, guys, for watching. The link for that can be found down below in the description, and we'll see you next time.